So yeah, I'm going to be presenting to you today a bit of news about the community releases. Starting off, with the Lustre working group. So we've been operating for, well over a decade now. And so I usually include a slide like this in my presentations just to sort of promote the group and to try and encourage broader participation. There are a couple of significant changes on this slide that I'd like to draw attention to. First is that my co-lead has just recently changed. So Dustin Leverman of Oak Ridge had been the co-lead with me since I took on this role in, I think, 2016 maybe. And he just recently has had a change in his role at the lab, and so has less bandwidth for the organization. So, but I'm glad to say Rick Moore, also of Oak Ridge, has stepped up. He's a regular participant in the group, so I've worked with him for a long time, and I'm looking forward to working with him more closely going forward. But I would like to say, publicly acknowledge Dustin's efforts over the years and thank him for all his service. And then the other thing that's sort of notable here as well is the graphic at the bottom, which shows the OpenSFS survey, the number of respondents to the survey every year since we've been doing it since 2012, every sort of February, March sort of time frame. And we did have slightly up this year on last year's survey number of respondents, but it was 64. It's still, it is comparable to previous years, but you can see we have had higher numbers in the past. It would be really great to get more response on that survey. We do make decisions based on the data we get. It would be really good if we had more confidence that we were getting a statistically significant sample of opinion. So going into some of the details, I just literally was sitting there as Kevin was introducing me, uploading these slides onto the wiki page. So if you want to look at it in more detail, the report, it is now available. But here are the highlights. First of all, about people's support situation, whether they pay someone for formal Lustre support, whether they just use the software open source and just maybe refer to the mailing lists if they have issues, or if they have a formal support arrangement. So this, and we've had this question like right through the time we've been doing the survey, and it has been interesting that we have seen a slight shift in the balance, that now there is a sort of the majority of the respondents on the survey are using the software open source. So I think this is sort of due to two factors. We've got obviously the technology, the file system's matured and people feel more confident to use just the software as free open source software. But also there's a bit of, selection bias in that we promote this survey on the mailing list. And so it's people, perhaps disproportionately people who are using the software open source who are subscribed to the mailing list. So, but, even if there are some flaws around it, it is the best source of information we have about what people are doing with Lustre in the community. So going on, this is sort of specifics about the nature of what people are using Lustre for. We've had this kind of question for some years now, and generally it's sort of very main takeaway most years is as well. There's a huge variety of activities that people are doing, but the main thing that's changed maybe or become more prevalent over the last few years is AI machine learning is becoming a more common response. So over half the respondents of the survey said that their primary usage of Lustre included AI and machine learning. So often that was not the only answer they gave, it was paired with something else. And so I think that's the sort of what we're seeing as people are sort of introducing AI and machine learning workloads into other fields as well, some of these other fields that are represented. So Lustre versions, this is often the question that I most carefully scrutinize when we see this. We put a lot of effort into producing the community releases and making sure they're, fit for purpose. So it's really, really want to see that, how well are people adopting them out there in the community. So you can see on your left, the blue is the 2022 data. The red is the 23 and the green is the 24. These are normalized by percentage, so you can do better comparisons despite the different numbers of respondents of different years. So you can sort of see the pattern that generally over time, the older releases, people are sort of using less. 2.15 only became available for the last year for the first survey. I had kind of expected it may actually be the top most common used version in this survey, but it was actually neck and neck just about with 2.12 and 2.15. Many sites or many respondents seem to have both still, obviously in the sort of process of transitioning. So I do fully expect next year we will see 2.15 be the dominant one. Moving on. So, we did introduce this year a question about the next LTS. So I had some people asking about this already. And equally, some people seem to throw up their hands in horror at this suggestion of moving, so we included the question. I'm not surprised at the response, honestly. There are, clearly some people who would advocate to go straight to 2.16 as being an LTS release for whatever reason that is, whether it's they want to have the RHEL 9 server support, say, or some newer feature, maybe IPv6 or something. But for the bulk of respondents, there was a very clear message that it's a bit premature to think about that. So we'll continue to ask this question, and I would expect that maybe we'll see a slight shift, maybe next year's survey. But for now, people seem to be in a bit more wait and see mode, and still in that process of transitioning across. So feature usage, this, as we haven't had major release come out in the last year, this isn't awfully different from last year. People are interested in some of the newer features. I really hope over the course of the next couple of days, we get to hear people's actual production experience using some of those newer features. That would be really interesting. Again, a lot of effort goes into trying to develop these capabilities and to check the quality of them is there. The real acid test is that, do people find them useful? Are they doing what they're intended to do? Going on to the Linux distro usage. So with the servers, we have, as you'd expect, this is sort of tied in quite closely to the Lustre version. So you see RHEL 7, or, when I say RHEL here, to be clear, it's any RHEL derivative. So probably CentOS in that vintage, and Rocky or Ulmer could be options in the RHEL 8 vintage. You see it's very, very close between RHEL 8 and RHEL 7, and that's sort of fairly natural because you're seeing, anything older than 2.12 or before would be a RHEL 7 servers, and then 2.15 would be RHEL 8 based. And then what's kind of interesting is the third most common category is RHEL 9. So that's interesting because we don't actually have a release out that formally supports that. So I did dig into that a little bit, and as far as I could tell, that was people who were using 2.15 with ZFS, and then clearly were building that themselves and finding it just works. So we haven't tested that, or I'm glad it works, but that's kind of an interesting development. So clients, more so here you see even stronger, sort of the third up from the bottom. I don't know if that text is that visible from back where you are, but that's the RHEL 9. And that's sort of still third, but much closer to the bottom one is RHEL 7, and the middle one that's way out in front is RHEL 8. So that's kind of where people are in terms of, fairly, again, not unusual that we see people move their client versions to newer distros much more rapidly and a bit more conservative with the servers. So, and then we have a question about the usage between ZFS and LDiskFS, which was very useful for me to cross-reference with the that previous question. So the larger red is LDiskFS, the green is ZFS, and the blue is both. So that was 11% actually have both options available in use and production of the respondents. So, and again, we've had slight variants of this, or trying to track this over some time, and it's been clear that, ZFS did grow from, the sort of maybe 10 years ago, I think, around it was introduced, but then it sort of plateaued, but it's still like a very healthy portion of the community still favor that. Okay, so just general analysis of this. Yes, I already mentioned, I suspect 2.15 will be the most common option by next year. There was another question, which was more of a qualitative question where it was free text. And we've had variants of this again over the years, and the feedback's been a little bit, trying to sort of ask the question in the right way to get, something that's sort of more actionable is tricky. So we asked the question, when instead of saying what's missing in Lustre, and then often people just say, oh, it's fine because, they're using it already, they're on the mailing list, they're obviously bought into a certain degree. We frame the question, when you use something other than Lustre or similar technology, why is it that you do that? And so that did get a bit more response than asking the question in a more direct way. And of course, our intention is the same. We're like, well, what could we do so that you would use Lustre more? And so we had a number of people talk about better S3 integration. So I know that there's some vendors have some options there, but maybe something in the community space, there could be some demand for that, it seems. And then other than that, there was definitely some things which it would be, I mean, these surveys are anonymous. We want people to be frank and forthright. But sometimes it's you kind of would wish that you had a bit more of a dialogue about it. So if you're responsible for these comments, I'd like to chat while we're here. And even if you're not and have some views, I welcome chatting on a break or at the event tonight. So yeah, sometimes I think we need to do a better job from the comments. It seems like we need to do a better job of information. There's often people will say, several answers with saying they used a different technology because, what they said was missing was actually something we have. So then the question is, do we not let you know that? Do you unaware that it exists? Or is it that what we have isn't quite right? It isn't meeting your usage. So that's kind of where it would be interesting to dig into a bit more. And then in particular, and I think Andreas may touch on this as well, because there was one comment that was like, oh yeah, well, we've used Lustre, but for ages and we're really happy with it, but we're going to have to move to another flashy file system. That was the exact quote, because we're going to have more AI workloads running on SSD, so we'll have to use something else other than Lustre. I was like, what? Because as you saw the earlier question, a lot of people already are using Lustre with AI machine learning workloads, and definitely in my day job, I'm aware we have people doing that at very large scale. So that's just us maybe not being effective enough at sort of maybe counteracting some misinformation by competing technologies. And so I know that's one of the initiatives that OpenSFS is looking to, and there'll be a bit more about that, I think, in the OpenSFS update later. So anyway, getting on, that's the survey. So getting on more to the newsy portion of things. So we will have a 2.15.5 release out soon. So if you saw, but RHEL 9.4 went GA Thursday, I think, last week. And RHEL 8.10 is estimated to be sort of mid-May, so could be any day now. We've done some work with the betas, so we're sort of ready to go. We're just waiting for the final release versions, and hopefully Rocky versions will swiftly follow as well, as we're qualifying to sort of give that option for people as well. So that should be out, I would estimate, maybe by the end of June, we should have, the Red Hat version out, and we'll have done the necessary to spin things out. So B2.15 is sort of getting close to what the final version would be. If you know of something that you think is important that isn't there now, this is a great time to let me know about it versus the day after we announce the release. So again, please come chat to me on a break about that. So 2.16, so this is the major release we've been working on for a very long time. So we had sort of consciously chosen to make the major releases less frequent to allow for them to have more content and not to be, just reflecting the fact we're a more mature project. So that was a deliberate thing, and we saw that with the release gap between 2.14, 2.15, etc. But 2.16, that's extended much beyond what we did 10, and broadly this is to do with the marquee feature for this release is the IPv6. I know James Simmons is going to talk about that more tomorrow. I know you're talking about another topic. Oh, that's actually because you're talking about the inline kernel work, right? Next, yeah. So that was another thing that we had in the survey, was there was this big. One of the respondents said that the thing that they most missed, that it wasn't Lustre, wasn't in the kernel, and that it was too bad that everyone had given up and wasn't trying to do that anymore, and quoted some 10-year-old news article. And it was like, but that really is still happening. But anyway, yeah. So 2.16. It has been a bit delayed. We are very close. I won't, allow James to elaborate, but basically we're just some minor changes to the test framework are needed to just get the automated test automation running, and we should be good to go, and then can move forward with sort of release candidate and finalizing the release. So hopefully this is soon. Still with those releases, there is a bit more, quite a bit more testing effort that goes in with all the, larger changes. The delay has meant that we've been able to, we will be able to include sort of newer distros that have come out. So we will have updated that. So hopefully that will extend the shelf life and the usefulness of the release when it does finally come out. And I mentioned that kind of these are the marquee features that are on the graphical roadmap on lustre.org, but Andreas will go into a bit more detail bit later. Is it this afternoon, Andreas? Yeah, this afternoon, to go into some bit more detail about some of the other goodies that are in the 2.16 release. Okay, so contribution stats. So this is just about who's doing some of the development efforts around the releases. So this is obviously not the final numbers. We're still doing landings. We've still got like a couple of months. It's quite blurry, or maybe that's my vision. Obviously it's easier to see on when the slides are published if you're interested in the specifics, but broadly speaking, we have sort of usual suspects of who are doing a lot of contribution. There's sort of the DDM Whamcloud team, HPE, Oak Ridge, SUSE, and AWS, and then we've got sort of Microsoft and Oracle and NVIDIA all popping up with some kind of contributions. And I did want to highlight as well so the left-hand graphic is the number of commits, like straight the number of patches, and the right-hand one is number of reviews. So there can be a lot more reviews than actual patches because maybe patches iterate several times until their finalized version. But I did want to I doubt you can see that at all, but the ones I've highlighted in red are contributors for this release who I think are first-time contributors. So there's JLab, who maybe they did a long time ago and I've forgotten, but they certainly haven't for a while, so that was great to see them. And then we had Iowa State and University of Nebraska as well, both had a change in. So, and I should mention Aeon Computing as well, another regular contributor, so thanks there as well. And then seeing how this fits in, over releases over time. Again, this is not maybe very easy to see all the details, but what this is showing is the top graph is specifically just the releases, and you can see, so the rightmost is the 2.16, and the blue line at the top is the number of commits, and the red line is the thousands of lines of code. So you can see 2.16, how it compares over time. You can see it's the highest number of commits by some margin. But of course, the reason is because it's had the longest time. And if you compare it to on the number of commits, it's still, while it's relatively high, it's still some way lower than 2.4, which is this red big spike here. And so the 2.4 release was a very significant amount of change went in. That's when we introduced CFS and D&E support, and I think most of the plumbing for HSML went in. So there was a number of very large changes went in that release. So this lower graph is normalized, and I kind of did this after actually a comment that Ellis from Microsoft made in the BOF at supercomputing. I was kind of interested to go and check this. So basically, this is the number of commits divided by the number of days that the release was open for. So it's kind of normalizing the amount of changes just to sort of see. And then that actually you can see, so again, like 2.16 is on the right, and you can see it's kind of middle of the pack kind of thing compared to, and again, you see the spike for 2.4 way up ahead of everything else. So anyway, I think that's a reasonable thing you'd expect. Like it's, lots of smaller changes, lower risk, but still, providing some value. So here's the latest roadmap from Lustre.org. We probably will refresh this ahead of supercomputing to recenter it on the dateline, basically showing 2.15.5 projected to come out towards the end of the quarter, 2.16 sort of hopefully earlier rather than later in Q3, and then sort of, 2.17, 2.18. Again, Andreas will get into that a bit more this afternoon. So contributions, I always like to, promote this. There's lots of ways you can get involved, from, answering the survey, fairly simple, to actually doing specifics. Even just if you find an error in the docs, even just reporting that can help, because there's so much, body of work's been accumulated over the 20+ years Luster's been around. It really needs the people, eyes on the ground, and to kind of help keep that stuff up to date and relevant. And then I had spoken, like in some talks I'd given towards the latter part of last year, we were anticipating having to do a fairly significant move due to changes with Atlassian software, their rules, but we actually found a way that was less invasive to do things. So we're actually completed all our move. We're good to go for a while, a long run now, without having to move. We did do some tidy ups, anticipation of actually having to do more of a larger sort of migration process. So we did do things that perhaps we should have been doing all along, but hadn't done, like, deactivating unused Jira accounts. So, if you sort of hadn't logged on to Jira for 5 years and decided today was the day and you can't get in, that's why. But so again, it's just drop us if you find, perhaps the people who actually make the effort to come to LUG is not the people that's going to apply to. But if you do run into anything or hear of someone, just encourage them to drop us a note. We could quickly get those things sorted out. But that's almost certainly what the issue is. And then, just to recap. So 2.16, we're coming into the final straight, at last it looks like. But, so that's still maybe a couple of months out for the actual release. Definitely it would help if people are interested in testing these new capabilities, new distros, whatever else. If you've got like a window where you could do that, that would be fantastic. It gives us more confidence, more breadth of testing on different hardware, etc. is always very valuable. And then 2.15.5, as soon as Rel 8.10 comes out, we'll move forward with the last stages of that. That should be a much simpler release. It's mostly just bug fixes, the new distro support, and another plug for the Lustre working group. So, please feel free to just lurk on the mailing list or come along and join the call if you're interested. Okay, so that's everything I had. Does anyone have any questions?
I'll start with, we've got a question back there. So Peter, the one where you from the survey, LDiskFS and ZFS, and then there was both. Do you think that's people who have two different systems running, or they're mixing like LDiskFS for the data and ZFS for metadata?
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. It's both of that possible. I have heard of people doing that. It's definitely works. It's not something we regularly test, but I believe it. It's definitely people who've been doing that for some time. But yeah, I think there's a lot of sites that do have both options for different purposes.
Peter, I was curious about 2.16. I know previously you'd been thinking about making it a maintenance release. Is that still under consideration, or with your comments on the survey results, are you saying, no, we're not going to make that a maintenance release?
I'm not saying no. I'm saying not at this point. So okay. There's no immediate plans to do it. So, I think it's worth asking that question, and I think it's good not to, like with the LTS releases, I actually think it's good not to make a decision too early, because you can get new information. Things can take longer than you expect or less time than you expect. Other things can raise in priority, right? We had for those of you who've been around a while, we had an issue like with a similar thing with the 2.4 release, actually, that a lot of people were like, yeah, all this cool new stuff's coming. So we want 2.4 to be where the maintenance releases come out. And then because the final changes missed out on HSM, there was a lot of people were then very unhappy that we should have made it 2.5. And then we switched to 2.5, and then people who had jumped on board fully on 2.4 were like, wait, what? We thought you were behind this. So we want to make sure that when we do have a decision, it's signaled ahead of time that this is what we're going to do, this is the direction, and that but it's a good decision. We know we're not going to make everyone happy, right? But at least, even if you're not fully happy with it, at least you should be informed adequately to plan around it, right? So.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay. Well, as always, if you don't want to ask questions in front of the whole room, but we're happy to chat with you privately on a break or at the event. Okay. Thanks, everyone.